So let's see, I want to customize this part here. I can go to edit and I see this template in my browser. There it is. So here is the string that I want to change. So let's just change it into something else for demonstration purposes. Welcome to my RDS project. Save new. And this is now changed. So if you are familiar with HTML, this is all very much customizable. And if you want to, for example, change the forms, we had a question about the forms and the form fields. The mechanism is very much the same. So this is all individual pages that you can go and edit, and it might look a bit daunting in the beginning, of course, but so here is the semantic form. This is where the field definitions are loaded from the database, and underneath here we have the different types of inputs. All this is also in the help, but personally I find it also quite helpful to just look at how things are put together. So we have this text input here for identifiers. We have this composite input for the names, and I'm just gonna open another tab so you can actually see how this looks. So the composite inputs that we just saw is this group, and this is quite useful if you have values which have several values, and that's very often the case in CDOC CRM. So you have an entity which is, for example, identified by an identifier, and the identifier has a value, has a part, and this is where we use these composite forms. So this is where you can change and edit it, or also maybe in the first instance, also maybe remove fields that you don't need. Say if I don't want to have the cultural affiliation field, I can just not display it. That's something I can do here. And now the cultural affiliation is gone. So this is just a way of editing individual pages. Now, personally, this is a good way for, I find this is a good way for experimenting, but of course, if you want to persist these changes, it's better to familiarize yourself with the app mechanism, and you can find it in the help here. And what it is a collection of files in a folder which contain all these templates, all these configurations, what Wolfgang showed before, these lookup repositories. It can contain all of this, but it does not need to contain all of this. So you can, for example, just change a few parameters or add a few pages to your app, and it will then be deployed in addition to the other apps which are already integrated in RDS Local. So one thing I can do now is, for example, I can see which apps are already installed, and this is again in the administration page. There is this apps and storage page, and here you see this stack that we saw on the slide earlier. With the RDS services, RDS branding, and RDS local. And the fourth is runtime. And in runtime, we have everything which I just changed and customized. So for example, if I go here and I export this runtime, let's unzip that. I get this folder structure. And I'm just going to quickly focus on, can I make this bigger? Yeah, data. So in data, there is a folder templates, and you can now see here the 3 templates that I already changed. I forgot that I changed this one, but this is the start page that I changed. This is the new person page that I changed. And the file names refer to URIs in URL encoded formats. So this is maybe a bit, takes a bit getting used to being able to read, but this is basically the URI that you see here are this page's new person. All right. Now, if I want to develop my own app with this, as I said, I prefer not to work in the front end, but rather in my code editor, which currently in my case is Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to open my RDS local folder in VS Code.
And maybe also zoom in a bit, Florian.
Yeah. Exactly. There we go. So, and what I'm going to add here is a folder for my app. And I'm just going to open the help page for the apps again. Mechanism. There we go. So I'm going to create a new folder here. I'm just going to call it my app. And you see what is actually needed. And I think it also spells it out here. Here, plugin properties is the only mandatory file. Plugin.properties just defines the name and some metadata of your app. And in fact, I actually gonna download another app which is already installed, just to give you an example. So let's also download this RDS local app. So of course you don't need to download it because these are the apps that are also available on the RDS repository. So here you see again these folder structures. We have templates, we have config, and we have these plugin properties files. And this just says there's a name, a provider, and a version. So I'm just going to copy this. So this is my app. And I'm going to add plugin.properties. And I fill in this information.
Florian, the plugin ID should match the folder name.
Ah, yes, sorry. I forgot I changed my app. There we go. Okay. So this is now my app. And Wolfgang, correct me if I'm wrong, if I map this now to the apps folder, I should already be able to see it.
Yes.
So that's what I personally like to do. So in the Docker Compose override, you see either I or somebody already prepared it. I can map this volume to my app folder. I just have to make 2 dots here because there's my Docker Compose, there's my app folder. So I map this folder to my app. And I make another Docker Compose up.
You might want to also zoom in again the terminal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's see if it's already up again. No, it takes a bit of time. You can also Docker Compose logs -f gives you follow of the log, so you can see when it's actually started. That's up here. Log in again, log in again. There we go. So now if I go to my apps, I should see my own app here. Now, the nice thing is that most of the things that I add here will live update in the platform. So let's just look at my runtime folder, which I downloaded. So for example, if I want to change the start page, I can, in my app folder, I can add data templates folder. And let's just reuse the start page. Now, one thing before I start editing here is because I already changed the page in here, the runtime storage will always override it. So you see, this is now coming from the runtime app, which is on top of my app and RDS local. So I'm just going to delete this page from runtime. And deleting will not remove it, it will just kind of remove it from my runtime. And now it will be using my app page. So for example, if I just going to get rid of everything, let's just say hello. This will update here. So you can work with your own code. You can use this app structure to customize templates. Can use our existing templates if you want to go in there and just change a few things. And then you can basically hook in your own app into the RDS local system. Okay, so we already saw some configuration options. Another thing I want to probably configure is the title. And if I go to, I'll just show you maybe the folder. So we have the templates, which are the individual pages, but we also have some other elements which live in the config page layout folder. So this is the header HPS file, which basically defines how the entire part which is appearing up here. So if I want to change this, I do it again in my own app. I make a config page layout. There I create a header.hps file. And I'm just going to reuse what is already here, customize it a bit. There we go. So this defines, it's a bit too big. So as you can see, this is also components. These BS components are coming from Bootstrap. They're also documented in here. So you can use the Bootstrap components. There are some examples also here. And this is also where I can customize it. For example, if I want to, I don't know, I just remove something. It's always easier to remove than add something. Remove this assets drop down. Just get rid of it. And I think this one is also live updating. Yeah, there are some things where you have to restart the platform. Some things you can live update.
Sometimes it also helps to just clear the caches, not the browser caches, but the system caches. Maybe you can show that once more.
This is here also in the administration page. Cache invalidation. There's a backend cache and a front-end cache. Let's just clear both. So the backend cache, if I'm not mistaken, is responsible, for example, for the labels. So we can get labels for every entities, and they are cached. Front-end cache is, I think, responsible for things which are queried in the front end. But to be sure, just change both.
Yeah, the backend cache also contains lookup results. So if you search repeatedly for the same token plus parameters like number of limits and stuff that's also being cached.
Good. So, okay, I'm just going to delete my own start page again, and this will then revert back to the app start page. Cool. Okay, I just wanted to show you some more places where you find things to configure. We already changed this welcome to RDS project. Maybe, I don't know, it actually uses the label. But I think this one uses another property. So let's say I want to change this RDS platform link here. And it's actually not specified in my other HBS. Instead, it is here as a variable deployment title. So there are some variables which are stored in properties, and you can find them also on the platform in settings, in system settings. And here, for example, under UI configuration, there is the deployment title. So of course you can go in here and change it, or you can add this property to your own app. And once again, I'm just going to check in our RDS local app to where to find it. So here you see this UI.prop file. This is where the deployment title is specified. So if I want to override this, in my config folder, I create UI.prop and I add here deployment title is my project. And here I'm not sure if I need to restart or if it will fetch this.
I'm also not 100% sure, but I think you might need to restart.
I think I need to restart.
To clear the caches, but I guess if you set it through the UI, it will be visible immediately.
Let's see. No, I think I need to restart. So restarting, you can use Docker Compose, or you can also do it through the admin interface under system management. There's a handy button, restart platform. And this takes a couple of seconds. Oops. There we go. And you already see my RDS project. That's it. Okay. So these are places where to change and find things. It's all, there's a description on the help page about what is located where. Personally, I find it always helpful to look at examples. For example, here again, you see in the RDS global services, you also see the configuration of the repositories. So again, if you want to experiment with the settings here, but then you want to persist them in an app, you can add them as a repository configuration. Let's just look at this federated lookup and copy them into your own app, and this will be overwriting or adding to what is already there. Okay. One thing I might try, I haven't tried it, but it came up yesterday in the hands-on, is when we currently create persons, it will use our swissartresearch.net URI. And you might want to use your own URI. And I think this is something we're going to change in the next version of RDS Local. So we're just going to show you how we probably going to change this. So in the admin interface, we have a namespace definition. And there is also a helper in the template functionality. just going to demonstrate it. So, oh, that's maybe also interesting. If you just enter something which doesn't exist yet, you have the ability to create a new page. But this is what I'm doing here. So there is a helper, which is called resolve prefix. And what it does is basically, if I have something like CRM, I don't know, P14 carried out by, it will resolve this into the entire URI. And I can also just, for example, use the prefix, and it will resolve this into the complete URI. Now, if you go back to our create person page, and I'm actually going to do this properly. So I take this new person and put it in my templates. So there is in the semantic form section something called new subject template. And what this does is it takes this URI -person and it adds a new UUID. So there are some variables you can use there, also found in the help, which allow you to generate URIs. So I'm going to replace this with the mechanism that I just showed you. So first, I want to define my own namespace prefix. So
you might also want to do this in the app, maybe.
Very good, very good. Yes. So this is another configuration. And it is in config namespaces.prop. So this is what I can do here. And you see the schema is just, I think you use uppercase for kind of internal namespaces, so but it's not necessary. So let's just call this my resources. And I say, okay. Singular. Okay. And again, I'm not sure if I need to restart. Let's just reload this page. And you can also see which app contributes which namespaces. No, I think I need to restart for that. It always gives me time for a sip of coffee.
So if you make the same changes through the UI, you would not need to restart those, and they are effective immediately. Just if you do this behind the scenes, sometimes for some of those things, you might need to restart.
I like to avoid doing it over the UI because I had just had cases where I ended up that something was overwritten in my runtime app, and then I changed it in the app and I couldn't understand why it's not updating. So let's see, what did I call it? My resource. There we go. So there is my resource. So I just change this line. So I keep the person because that's refers to the person, and resolve prefix my resource. Save this. And so let's go back to the workspace. Let's go to create person. Link it at my name. I don't think it worked, right? Maybe I need to change something else.
It should have, but you might have another redirect. Can you search for the prefix once more?
No, maybe I still have it in my runtime storage. Maybe just it exactly with what I described might just have happened. So let's see.
Yeah, might be.
Yeah, because that's the one. Okay, let's try again. So I already exist. Let's make a Wolfgang.
While Florian is typing, just one explanation what Florian meant by that. So all those apps or storages are put on top of each other as a stack, and there's some override ordering. And the runtime storage, which is basically the scratch area of the system, is always on top. So anything that you do through the UI typically ends up in the runtime storage. And this is also what you can easily export, as Florian has shown. So if you just start doing stuff, changing things, this is where everything ends up. And the app or all apps that have been loaded end up in a certain order. By default, it's, I think, lexicographical order when loading those. So that means if content is provided in multiple apps, then the last one will win. And the order that will win, so to say, when resolving files or so, is as shown in the admin apps page.
Okay, so I just kept the suspense before pressing save, and it looks good. So now I have Wolfgang Shell as my resource. / person. Yes, because I added a slash here, which is not necessary because the slash is already in the prefix. So that's how it should look. Okay, I see two questions in the chat. One, if we add, for example, linked art namespaces, yes, we would also just add it in the namespaces.prop. Maybe it's also useful to show this project that I mentioned yesterday also exists as an app. And here we have also various additional namespaces. Here, for example, linked art. And I think Thomas asking, can we demonstrate also the scenario where the user needs to determine in UUID part of the new records URI? So this, Thomas, do you mean you have a form field which is used as part of the URI?
Yes, hello everybody. Sorry for being late. Actually, at some point we discussed the possibility where user needs to create records, but the identifier part of the URI is already existing. So they want to say, I am adding Florian Kreutli, and in my namespace it is ID 1234. So you cannot rely on a created UUID, but you would rather have to use your own identifier. And I remember that we discussed a solution where the first part of the form would ask for the identifier part, and the second part would then allow you to edit the record or the instantiated entity.
Yes, so there is this new subject template attribute of the semantic forms. So this is what we use here. And here we use UUID as kind of, the identifier part. But this one also supports using a field value. So if I have a field with a certain variable name, I can add it here. So in this example, identifier is not a good example here because it actually creates an entire URI. But that's what I would use. So I have the field definition here, and this is added as identifier variable, and I could put it here, and this will then use the value of this field as a placeholder here. So you can use a numeric identifier that you might already have. You can also use an entire URI if I just use this one. So yeah, the scenario that you described was a workaround I used earlier when this was not yet possible. So I would have the user first enter the identifier, then create a form based on that. But with this mechanism, you can do it in one form. You just have one field that as the identifier part of the URI.
Okay, thank you. The reason why I'm actually asking is we work with a lot of projects which already have been creating URIs when writing TEI text or stuff like that. And if you want them to edit these records and add more information and align them with existing records, they obviously don't want to change their identifier part of the URI, and that would be extremely helpful to allow that actually.
Yes, that's entirely possible. I think Robert is no longer in the meeting, but he did exactly this when migrating the ISMI or creating interface for the Islamic manuscript projects where they already had identifiers, so that mechanism was used there.
And it's the same thing, but we also have projects where they have built a part of, so they already have some data and they have some kind of logic to generate new URIs. So for example, that would be maybe an incremental number prefixed by a type, or it would be sort of things like that. And another case, which we try to advise against, it's a slugified version of some attribute like Wolfgang minus shell. And then the store will look up if there's already one, it will add a number or things like that. So this kind of a little bit more logic or generated URIs that are based on not UID where you expect them to be unique, but just to check first. Is it something that can be implemented as well?
You can get quite creative, yes. So so this is the new subject template, which means it expects to generate a URI. But what you can also use is just the subject value attribute, and so I could just fix one here. But what I could also do is so these brackets here are backend helpers, and you see here. Let's see backend templating, the helper functions, and you can actually also execute. I don't know if I find the example here. Single value from select. There we go. You can also execute a Sparkle query. So you could also assemble a URI from things that are already there, or you could increment something. So that's also possible. And then you would just define a fixed subject.
And then that's cool. The part where if there's already one, is it something that's there's always the concurrency issue?
So yes, wait, I did implement something like this, and what is a useful way, a useful mechanism? It's in the field definitions. So let's see if we have a scenario where we need to enter an ID. So you ask the user for an ID and you enter it, but it might already exist in the system. And for this, you have the ask validation pattern. So this will tell you if it is valid. So if you enter 1, 2, 3, 4 and there already exists 1, 2, 3, 4, you will not be allowed to enter. And if I'm not mistaken, this pattern will also execute before pressing save. So it's not just something which is in the front end, but it will also verify again when you try to save it. Now, in the scenario where you don't ask the user for something, but you generate something. Okay, now we get really into the deep customizations.
No, just the scenario. the scenario I was thinking about, if I have, I'm sorry, I'm using your name, but if I have already one Wolfgang shell in my system, and I legitimately need to add a new one, which is not the same. And I want to use the RDFS label, so the Wolfgang shell as attribute to generate the URI. I actually, I am right.
Yeah.
I'm right in putting Wolfgang shell, but I want -1 or something. It's some.
Okay, then I would, in this case, I would, you have used this scenario of query to generate the URI, and in your Sparkle query, make this distinction. The risk here is that you generate, this will be written when you load the form. So if in the meantime somebody else creates a Wolfgang shell, that there might be some conflict. So there are ways to accommodate that. Personally, I think the safest is always to use like in such a scenarios, to not work with URIs which are text, but which are unique, because then you don't risk it. But so there are mechanisms to prevent collisions from happening. But this is, there's a lot of customization, and I think this is something you would need to take care of.
This also touches a bit a philosophical question: how to create or generate IRIs in the first place. Like, do you want to have speaking IRIs which have some visible parts, or would you rather follow Wikidata's guidelines where you have just these Q1, 2, 3, 4 things, but which are then also language independent, right? They are not really telling what it's about. That's what you have your labels for. But then there's also not problem in renaming things or so. So it's a bit of philosophical discussion.
There's a practical reason for some of the projects that we worked on as well, is that usually if you translate your data in some kind of web platform to display what you've got, there's a very good chance that the URI of the object you're displaying will be part of the URL, and having kind of explicit URL always helps to find the page. So that would be a use case where we sometimes say, okay, that makes sense. We definitely need to have Wolfgang-shell in the URI somewhere for practical reasons.
Yes, it's definitely possible, and I did it before also in a scenario where I wanted to have this because, for example, I wanted to have URIs, and what I did there is I first wrote the label to the URI to the database, and then use the form to create it, because then the entity already exists. Because the risk is really if you take time with entering the form, then something happens. Another thing you could maybe do is, you can also combine these templates. So, for example, if I have a field label which I want to use, this would then create, the resource/person, unique UUID / Wolfgang shell, which means if somebody creates another Wolfgang shell, it will still have the label, but it will have a unique UUID between. So that's maybe a way of combining both, but I think it's really more a matter of your own conventions than the technical realization. Okay. I think we can have 5 more minutes if there are more questions, or if you want me to demonstrate or try something very quickly.
One thing I would suggest would be how to package up that app now and deploy it. So you now have it also just in your Docker Compose folder, but maybe we can quickly show in the end, an app is just a zip file and how you can deploy it.
Okay. That's a good question. So you can put it into, well, maybe I show 2 things, because the process that you describe is not the process I'm using, but there are different ways of doing it. So what I have open here is the Docker build file for RDS local. And what it does, it is building the individual apps and putting them into, I think, are these using zip files? Okay, maybe I shouldn't show this because it's not me who did it. So I instead show you how I do it. And this is in the scope of the Bilder der Schweiz online project. Because I actually keep the mapping to the apps folder. And you can actually also look at this in GitHub, it's public. So this is the entire data pipeline. And I have the mapping to the apps folder, which I have, just check again, in services research platform slash, oops, that's the wrong one, this one. Services research platform slash apps. I'm mapping this to the apps folder. And you see my BSO app here is as a Git submodule, which means it lives in its own Git repository. So I'm actually not deploying it as a zip, but I'm mapping the folder, which is a Git repository, which means when I update the app on the server, I just make a Git pull, and it pulls in the latest templates, and most of the things will live update. So that's one way of doing it. What you can also do is do a Docker file, and that's more the example that we have before, where the app folder is already baked into the Docker image, and then you can deploy that. Or you can use the zip file mechanism, I think, which is even possible to do here. So you can put your entire app in a zip and drag and drop it here, and then it will be deployed. So again, there's several options to do things. Yeah, I just see something is in the chat.
So there are some questions apparently about resolvable IRIs. So what you can do if your IRI points to your own actual installation. So in the case of RDS, for example, for RDS Global, if your IRI was http://rds.swissarmysearch.net/resource/whatever, then yes, it would be resolvable. Sometimes you need to resort to a couple of tricks. So either you can, so it depends how exactly your IRIs are. If you just follow the pattern hostname/resource/some local part, then this will just work. If you follow, if you have some slightly other parts, like for example, after the hostname not /resource/ but some other sub parts also, you might need to resort to some redirection tricks, for example, through a load balancer like Nginx that does some URL rewriting. You also have some partial capabilities in the platform themselves. Also, what you need to take care of nowadays, most systems actually run at with SSL or TLS encryption, so HTTPS. And if you generate HTTP URLs, you have to make sure that there's also redirect from the HTTP to the HTTPS equivalent. So this is all possible. It just sometimes require playing a bit with the deployment setup. And the question regarding negotiation, yes, Florian, would you open that help page with data publishing? I think there is one.
Is it called? No.
No, scroll up a bit on the right side. The RDF publishing under services, the last one.
There we go.
So this also describes content negotiation. So you can, in your accept header, for example, if you use curl like the example here that currently, you can get the turtle version of the data, for example. So there is some content negotiation built in, and that would also work there.
Can we get JSON LD?
JSON LD, I think, also works. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that version, but I think it did work also. You would have to try. It depends a bit on what is available by RDF4J, but JSON LD should work.
Just gonna quickly try this. It complained before. There we go. So I have the turtle representation. What would I have to do for JSON LD? Application?
You would have
applications or JSON ID, I think.
JSON-LD. No, doesn't. Application JSON. No.
Can you try
It's
with
LD plus
application
JSON.
/LD plus JSON? Yeah.
Genau, LD plus JSON.
Sorry, there were two people talking.
So try application /LD plus JSON.
LD plus JSON. Ah, very good. Yeah. Yes. And I mean,
but without the context. Okay.
But with the graph. Okay. Yeah. So for resolving things like this, what we do, or I do, is running an Nginx, which then would run here and then redirect to this the instance with the question mark URI equals blah blah blah, and this will then resolve in the browser, but also work with requests of other kinds.
The actual content, the data will be the usual everything for which that is a subject, or can you configure it?
It will be everything for which is a subject, I think. There is also the possibility, and let's see if I go into this territory, of defining query templates and exposing them in different ways. So, for example, if you want to get execute a certain query, get specific results, you could expose them as your own, as a different API and resolve to that. But now we are also entering the territory of customization, where you basically do more or less everything.
And by the way, this URL rewriting, a bit of that is also described on that help page on the same data publishing page on the bottom, where the content negotiation. If you scroll down a bit, this resolvable URI.
There we have it as well. There we go.
Is also there.
There we go.
Just yeah. So there's also some parts of rewriting possible. This doesn't mention HTTP to HTTPS or the other way around, but at least you can do some rewriting using this path to rewrite and so on. And for more advanced things, you might need some URL rewriting upfront, like using Nginx or something else.